Ladies and gentlemen, it is with profound honor that we welcome today Dr. Jacqueline Caulfield, Fulbright Specialist at the University of Lomé, whose compelling expertise illuminates the digital humanities at the intersection of art, education, and culture. Dr. Caulfield is an accomplished researcher, educator, and curator holding a doctorate in curriculum teaching from Teacher College, Columbia University. Her pioneering work integrates interdisciplinary and multimodal methodologies to redefine how we learn and acquire knowledge. Her presence here at the University of Lomé enriches our collective reflection on the digital humanities and inspires a creative dialogue between tradition and innovation. Mr. Caulfield, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Agbo. Thank you to
Yeah.
everyone who has joined us in person and online. We are so grateful for your participation. It is a great honor for me to be here with you and to welcome our illustrious guests today. So good morning to those of you in the US on the East Coast or tuning in from there, and good afternoon to those of us here in West Africa. It is a pleasure to gather again today as the final session of the 10-part Renaissance in Digital Humanities, Arts, and Research program, speaker series program that I have produced here at the University of Lomé as part of my Fulbright project work here. I've been so honored and overjoyed to be here and to be among all of the incredible faculty and graduate students who have been participating in our programming and working alongside me as well and learning alongside each other. I want to begin by offering my sincere thanks to our hosts and partners whose care has made this series possible, particularly the faculty and leadership at the Department of Anglophone Studies at the University of Lomé, and also to our colleagues here in Lomé, Togo at the US Embassy in Lomé. Your preparation for my arrival and this program, your generosity and commitment to scholarly exchange have shaped this experience in incredibly meaningful ways. I would also like to extend my sincere thanks to Dr. Monique Chisholm, Undersecretary for Education at the Smithsonian Institution, for her generous leadership and continued support of this work. As we move into the later and the last part of this series, we are reminded that digital humanities is not simply about technology. It is about responsibility. It is about recentering the human, how we care for memory, how we design systems of knowledge, and how we ensure that access, participation, and public engagement remain central to scholarly practice. These questions have surfaced across the series, the 10 different conversations that we've had over the past 4 weeks. And today's session continues that conversation from within one of the world's most influential cultural institutions, the Smithsonian Institution. Today, we are joined by colleagues from the Smithsonian Institution whose work sits at the intersection of education, archives, digital praxis, and public engagement. Their perspectives invite us to think carefully about how cultural institutions steward knowledge, engage communities, and make choices about how histories are preserved, interpreted, and shared. It is my sincere pleasure to introduce today's speakers. First, Anne T. Brittingham, Director of Educational Technology at the Smithsonian Institution. Dr. Brittingham's work focuses on how digital tools and platforms can support learning, access, and engagement across museums, schools, and public audiences. We are also joined by Philippa Rappoport, Head of Education and Engagement at Smithsonian's Office of Educational Technology, whose work centers on designing educational experiences that connect collections, digital initiatives, and diverse learners. and Kelly Elaine Navies, museum specialist and oral historian at the National Museum of African American History and Culture, whose practice foregrounds oral history, community memory, and ethical dimensions of archival work. Together, our speakers today offer insight into how digital humanities operates within cultural institutions, not as neutral systems, but as practices shaped by values, histories, and a responsibility to the public. As you listen today, I invite you to hold a few guiding questions that have animated this series from the beginning. Who gets to tell stories? How is knowledge organized, preserved, and made accessible? And how might digital humanities practices, when guided by care and ethical intention, support more just and inclusive futures? Thank you all for being here and for your seriousness, your curiosity, and generosity that you bring to this conversation. After our three presenters, we will have a Q&A, so I do encourage you to take notes and to prepare your questions for that time. Thank you so much to our speakers. And we can start with Anne Brittingham, and then Philippa and Kelly. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for that kind introduction, and thank you so much for having us speak today. We're excited to be here and to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing here at the Smithsonian. So Philippa's going to share the screen. And so we'll start with Philippa and I talking a little bit about the work that we're doing in the Office of Educational Technology. Wanted to start just giving you a little bit of background on the Smithsonian. So we are, Philippa, if we go to the next slide. Thank you. So what is the Smithsonian? So we're 21 different museums. There's 14 education and research centers and the National Zoo. It was founded in 1846 at the bequest of James Smithson. So he actually was an Englishman who had never visited America, but he left his entire estate for the founding of the Smithsonian Institution, for the establishment of a place dedicated to the increase and the diffusion of knowledge. So to give you a little sense of the 21 different museums, there's a range of types of museums. So we have art museums like Smithsonian American Art, Portrait Gallery, the Asian Art Museum. We have history museums like the National Museum of American History. We've got Kelly Elaine's museum here, the National Museum African American History and Culture Museum. The Hirshhorn Museum is contemporary art. So design with Cooper Hewitt, the Arts and Industries Building, our Air and Space Museum. So this kind of gives you a sense of the scope of the collections here at the museum across the 21 different museums. And then some of our research centers. You can see we have the Archives of American Art, the Astrological Observation Observatory that's up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, the zoo, which I mentioned, the Marine Station in Fort Pierce, Florida. We've got the Tropical Research Institute in Panama. So the Smithsonian truly is across the globe. To give you a sense of where we are in Washington, D.C., a lot of the museums are centered on what we call the National Mall. So that you can see here to kind of give you a sense of where we are. So the Smithsonian Castle, which is kind of in the lower part there, just underneath the National Mall, is the original Smithsonian building. And across the grass from there is American history and natural history. We've got, the Hirshhorn, Arts and Industries, African art, Asian art, air and space, kind of all centered there. There's a few locations just off the mall. So the Portrait Gallery and American Art Museum, the Renwick Gallery, and the Postal Museum. And then we also have Cooper Hewitt, which is in New York. And then the American Indian Museum has a location here in Washington, D.C., and also up in New York. So kind of trying to give you a sense of where all of these buildings are across Washington, D.C. So in terms of our collection holdings, I'm sure this is even higher than when I captured this screen grab, but we have over 157 million objects and specimens. You can see A large percentage of those are science specimens, so things that you would find at our natural history. And then you see history and culture there. And then the smallest is art with 351,000 objects. So to kind of give you a sense of the types of objects in the Smithsonian's holdings. And then the digitization of our collection is always ongoing. I think I don't know if it's around 25% of the collection has been digitized. A lot of that is available for open access, so anyone can use it without needing sort of permission, sort of copyright. So again, this is an area that we're always expanding to make our collection more accessible to the public. And then I just want to tell you a little bit about our Office of Educational Technology. So we're what we call a central unit here at the Smithsonian. So that means we have the opportunity to work across the Smithsonian with all of the different museums and research centers. So to give you a sense of our mission, what we're trying to do. So we report to the Office of the Undersecretary for Education, and our mission is to connect educators and educational communities to the Smithsonian's ecosystem of digital education resources. So we want to place the Smithsonian at everyone's fingertips, and specifically we're thinking about how we can get the Smithsonian into every classroom across America. So how we achieve our mission, so Smithsonian Learning Lab, which we'll talk a little bit about here, is our education platform where educators can take Smithsonian Museum objects and resources and use them in their classrooms. We connect to PK-12 educators with our museum educators here at the Smithsonian. So Philippa runs a professional development program called Cultivating Learning, where Smithsonian educators share the work that they're doing with educators across the country, classroom educators. So we serve as a resource for internal Smithsonian educators, providing kind of best practices and support, kind of helping them to kind of make sure the digital resources they're creating are done in a way that teachers can actually take them and use them. And then we're always looking for opportunities to build partnerships to expand our reach. And so as I mentioned, Smithsonian Learning Lab is our education technology platform that launched in 2016 with the goal of connecting classroom teachers and students to Smithsonian resources. So the next slide will show you what our homepage looks like currently. So it's all about sort of all of the different resources we have at Smithsonian and centralizing them. So if you're a classroom teacher, you don't have to go to American history to see their education resources or natural history to see theirs. We're centralizing them here in what we call Learning Lab collections, which allow teachers to discover all of the different resources that we have here at Smithsonian. They can create their own collections if they want. They can share them with their students and with other sort of teachers, and then they're able to learn with us through professional development sessions. So the site launched in 2016. Kind of the current site, a snapshot, we have just over 12,000 collections. So we kind of have what we call resources, which are kind of individual objects or kind of resources that are there. And then collections are when Smithsonian educators or classroom teachers pull a bunch of different objects, different learning strategies together around a theme, and we call that a collection. So you can see about 25% of them were created by Smithsonian staff, and then the rest are created by classroom teachers, partners, students. So the biggest percentage are social studies, but you can see that they engage with all different subject matters, and we're kind of pretty evenly dispersed amongst middle school, high school, and elementary school students. Most of the resources are designed to be done in under an hour, so under 1 hour of classroom time, and then sort of 1 to 2, and then some take a little bit longer, but we try to kind of think about how teachers can take them and easily integrate them into a classroom. So we're in the process. So as I mentioned, this site launched 10 years ago. So we're at a point where we're really starting to think about Learning Lab 2.0. I think the sort of digital education world has dramatically changed, and I think the classroom has really changed over the past 10 years. So we've been talking to teachers and really thinking about what Learning Lab should be in its next iteration, because we want to make the resources that are there easier to find and easier to use for classroom teachers and students. So we're in the process of doing research, sort of doing a lot of listening and talking. If you go to the next slide, Philippa. So our kind of goals for the next version of this site is we want to make sure the content is developed with the end user in mind. So thinking about the end user being our classroom teachers, because we want to make it easy for teachers to incorporate it into their classroom. We want to develop content in partnership with classroom teachers. If we're designing this for them, we want to make sure that we're designing something that they can actually want to use. We want to leverage our content strategy to help our Smithsonian educators create digital education resources that are most needed by teachers. And we're thinking about really starting with the content and then finding a technology solution to deliver it. So kind of really what Smithsonian is known for is our experts and our education and our resources. So if you create good content, even if the technology changes, the content will stay the heart of what we're doing. And we want to center the objects and provide a toolkit for how to teach with objects, which I'll talk a little bit more about as we think about object-based learning. So one of our goals for Learning Lab is to become a leader in object-based learning. And so what that kind of looks like for us. So thinking about the benefits of object-based learning. So we want to, if you go to the next slide, think about sort of how object-based learning provides a student-centered and inquiry-based approach to teaching and learning. So when we say object-based learning, we're thinking about how we can integrate objects, primary sources, objects from the collection into any classroom. So we kind of want to think about how we can use good questions. We want to think about object-based learning as a way to empower students to express themselves and their values and their opinions and their thoughts. When you look at a work of art, as we'll see with Philippa in a little bit, we all can have a different opinion about it, different thoughts about it. And so it creates a safe place to open up conversations. Object-based learning caters to different learning styles and different backgrounds. And then finally, it supports slow looking, which we'll talk a little bit more about here in a minute. It encourages critical thinking and problem solving. All right, so I'll turn it over to Philippa now to kind of show you sort of our object-based learning and sort of how to think about objects in action here.
So, hi everyone. So we'd like to do an exercise with you, and this is called a thinking routine that comes from Harvard's Project Zero series. And this one is called See, Think, Wonder. So we're looking at this work of art, and we want to start by just asking you, what do you see? And I don't know if we'll be able to hear you, so you could either call it out, or if it makes more sense, maybe to turn to your neighbor and share about what you see. So to give you an example, like Anne, what do you see?
So I see orange, black. I see kind of an orange circle. The top sort of makes me think about other circles that I'm seeing, looking at the different lines. Maybe it's buildings. So kind of letting my eye move across the painting. I sort of initially went over to the right side, and then I'm kind of working my way left back across. So just challenge yourself to see how many things you can find as you look at this artwork.
And it's really helpful to talk it through with someone, because sometimes when you say something or your neighbor says something, it makes you see something else you hadn't seen. So please do talk to each other. And we'll give about a minute for this.
And anyone who's online, feel free to take yourself off mute or drop some observations into the chat and we can read them out.
That would be great. And maybe you could read the chat.
Yeah,
here.
happy to.
Okay.
Dr. Agbo, do you have a student in the room who'd like to share what they see? Let me see if I can bring them
So
on.
Donna just put into the chat, see maybe an atomic bomb, a witch, cotton. Thanks, Donna.
Once, Dr. Cofield, one student here in the room would like to say what he sees.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, we don't see the student. Maybe you can spotlight the classroom camera.
Take the mic. Go ahead.
Well, hi. First of all, what I've seen is a kind of boat. Seriously, I've seen a boat, first of all. But my colleague who sits beside me has told me she was seeing a fish.
Mm.
So I'm kind of confused. And I'm seeing some kind of shadow. That is the red part and the part below. I was seeing a kind of shadow of the boat. But I'm seeing other things as radars and and I'm kind of confused. So that's briefly what I see. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. So one of the things about this exercise is that there are no wrong answers, right? We all see what we see and we all make sense of the world that way. So thank you for sharing that. So the next part of this exercise is to then think about what you see. So that's where you start trying to make sense of what it might be or what it might mean. So let's again take another minute or so and feel free to talk to each other, put it in the chat, yell it out loud, and then we'll share back in about a minute. So what do you think all these shapes might mean?
I see discussions in the room and lots of smiles. I think the student in the front with the blue shirt, you look like you have something to share. So Dr. Agbo, was there a student who wanted to share what they think about what they see? Or faculty, I see some faculty in there too. Or anybody online, you can feel free to unmute yourself.
Okay, speak a bit louder.
Yeah, I can see symmetrical pictures, giving me a sense of buildings on a riverside project being mirrored. What? And I have like a fuse plunging like a bomb that has been thrown on the left side of the picture. And there are some pictures that give a sense of mosque tops.
You said mask tops.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Yes.
It might be better come to the front to the microphone so we can hear you a little bit better.
How do I use it?
Yeah, just speak.
All right. I will start with the first question. What do I see? On this picture, I see different things, like, for instance, buildings like the mosque, a church. I also see different colors. I even see a shark. I see a shadow of, I think, a witch, because I see a witch hat. So this leads me to the second question. What do I think about what I see? I think this might, in my view, represent the world in which we live, with a diverse sort of things, good, bad, because here we have like the church. Next to the church, we have the mosque, we have the witch, we have the shack, we have some bright colors. We also have some, dark colors. So that's what I think. I don't know if I'm right, but
You think?
thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Fantastic. So the next question is, what does it make you wonder? And don't feel badly. The question I hear the most is, what is this? So, so there's no bad question. What does it make you wonder? So please think about it, and then anyone who would like to share back, or in the chat too.
Well, the picture gives me the impression of a Gothic scene,
Mm,
a Gothic scene with buildings hiding ghosts. Thank you.
great. Anyone else? Any wonderings? Any questions you have about it?
Well, I've come back again, and I wonder if I have the real eyes, because I'm seeing a shadow. Well, still at the bottom side, but the black part seems to be a bit different from what is at the top.
Mm,
So I can say that the images are different, talking about the black ones. And there are some dots, that is white dots, seems to be in the night.
mm,
And I'm seeing some snows, if I can say so.
mhm,
And the red part seems to be something like a lake. And the background seems to look like a space. And at the tip of the image, well, I feel like seeing something like aliens. Well, so it makes me wonder whether it is a word which combines everything. That is, we live in a world where everything is mixed and we have to live together with them. That's briefly what I think of it.
I
Thank
love
you.
that. Thank you. So I'm going to, I want to show you a video by the curator, Carmen Ramos, who collected this piece and brought it to the American Art Museum. But before I switch to that, I just want to ask you, do you think that you saw more and thought more about it by having this conversation with each other? Do you think it deepened your, what you saw? Or maybe just consider that since it's, unless someone wants to come up and talk about the process. The reason we really like to work with this routine with museum objects is, and also why a lot of educators are using it in classrooms, is that as people use it over and over again, it's almost like you're developing a muscle of observation, and you start to feel more confident, making your own observations and asking questions. So I really love it. So I hope you do too. And now I'll move on to the video by the curator, which will explain a lot. So here we go.
Shifting States Iraq was painted by Luis Gusesaceta. This is an artist's vision of the unrest that is taking place in Iraq. I think throughout Luis's career, he's been interested in exploring the human condition during times of crisis. And this really comes from his own experience as someone who experienced revolution himself. He was part of the first migration of Cubans to the United States after the Cuban Revolution of 1959. And ever since then, really, he's been focused on depicting contemporary history. One of the fascinating things about Luis and about the way that he works is that he is representing contemporary events, but they're not photographic representations, right? They're metaphorical. They're in many cases abstract, as is the case with Shifting States Iraq. And what you see in the painting is this huge, I like to think of it as an amoebic form right in the center. And there are two colors that are butting up against each other, and they're almost like warring each other, in conflict, in opposition to each other. And then around this large form, there are other forms that are emerging out of it that we can recognize. So there are references to mosques, weapons, oil rigs. There are these satellites that might refer to surveillance or satellites that we use for social media. The central image is encapsulated in almost like an explosion. On the edges of the canvas, there's all this gray and smoke. And even around it, if you look very closely at it, there are all these markings that he's done with crayon that to me kind of evoke individuals and people and humanity, because you could actually see his own hand that has created these forms. There's also a sense throughout the painting of something bubbling up. There are images that look like bubbling oil, in fact. The painting is very textual, so when you approach it, you can see how he's droplets of paint that give the painting a physical depth. There is this round circular form that looks like a petri dish. It looks like cells that are kind of becoming, something is becoming. It also looks like a red earth, alluding to just worldwide conflict. There are many, many forms that he embeds in the image, but he doesn't tell us what to think about it. He sort of throws it out there in this large form, and we as viewers need to decipher it and to make sense of a world and a moment that is momentous but also shifting. I really wanted to bring Shifting States into the collection for many reasons. I was very interested in acquiring a work by a Latino artist that really evoked our current moment. I thought that Luis's approach to depicting contemporary history was very current and also speaks to an artist working during wartime when we don't know what the outcome of war is going to be when you're right in the midst of it. And I think that uncertainty and the ways in which he has expressed it visually is very powerful.
Oops, hold on. Okay. Does anyone have any comments after seeing the video? No?
Yeah,
Brian?
Well, what I have to say is we were right about the things we said here in the room.
Yeah.
because we guessed about the world in which we live, and some of us gave hints of the meaning behind the ugly shapes, ugly and dark shapes on the pictures. And we really saw that the pictures were not, they were multi-dimensional in the sense that the different shapes alluded to many things that exist in the reality. And it was really a shifting world. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So that's, oh,
Oh yeah, I was going to add, I was
yes, please.
surprised by the size of it, the scale.
Mhm.
When we first saw it, I didn't realize how large it was. So I think that seeing that in person and it being so large would also have a strong impact.
Absolutely. Anyone else? Okay. So that's one example of, hopefully you can see that there are all kinds of ways to use museum objects for learning. You know, this could be a writing prompt, or you could connect objects to historical events. It's really endless. But I want to show you another technique we've been using, and that's the idea of using objects to open up stories. And so for a while, we've been working with a process called digital storytelling. And what that is a facilitated process in which individuals create short first-person videos. So there's a personal narrative combined with images or moving images. And the process, the name came from a group working out of California called Storywork, and they suggest a 5-part process that we've adapted a little bit. And the first part is to do a story circle, and we adapted it a little bit by using the activity we just did together. So the idea is that maybe you share some objects and people start sharing their thoughts about it, right? And it's really just to sort of help people talk and listen to each other. The next part is that people would each go back and write their own stories. Then they would record the narrative. And then they would start editing of putting the narrative and the images together. And then the last part of the process is sharing it together, which is really pretty, it's almost like a celebration, you know, when these videos are finished. So we had a fellow, Antonia Liguori, who visited our department in 2018, and we started the learning lab was fairly new then, and so we wanted to experiment with taking an image or an object that was in the learning lab and creating a personal story from it. And so we want to show you an example of that. So this comes from a local community college here, and the students were asked to document a visit to the Smithsonian. And so this is a digital story by Jameson Griffith, and let's watch.
On Sunday, November 10th, 2019, I woke up at 6 in the morning. Why did I do this to myself? I had to make sure to get 2 passes for the National Museum of African American History and Culture. These passes were made available at 6:30. I grabbed 2, one for my sister and one for myself, and went straight back to sleep, laptop still in my arms. We made it to the National Museum of American History in no time. There were so many people there who, like me, were eager to learn about anything and everything that the museum had to offer. The Many Voices, One Nation exhibit was home to a topic which interests and inspires me every day: the freedom of the people, all of the people. The many voices in this exhibit were often met with discrimination and segregation. However, they didn't allow this to stop them from fighting in what they believed in. I think this exhibit connected with me the most because African American history is all around me. My family tells me stories of generations past and what they went through. Most of these stories come from the civil rights movement. Stories of the Black student sit-in at the University of Northwestern, and even marches from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery, the state capital, surrounded me growing up. The way that the oppressed people of the United States were able to stand up for themselves and others in order to create change fascinates me. In the exhibit, which focused on early transportation, I found a copy of the Green Book. This book was created by Victor Hugo Green to help safely guide African Americans through the South during the Jim Crow era. It provided them with safe zones, hotels, and towns to avoid at all costs while on their journey. The Edward Lee Hotel is in this book. My great-great-great-grandfather owned this hotel. This historical building hosted many famous Black musicians, artists, and civil rights leaders who traveled through Jackson, Mississippi. Being reminded of this left me with a great sense of pride. The National Museum of African American History and Culture is my favorite museum. In the cafe, they prepare many dishes that are deeply embedded within our culture. My personal favorite was the Gulf shrimp and grits. Just thinking of that dish takes me back to hot summer nights in Greenville, Mississippi with great-grandma Lee and many other relatives. We would be popping fireworks, cooking in the kitchen, and exchanging stories over a hot plate. On the cultural expressions floor, the achievements of famous African Americans like Spike Lee, Denzel Washington, and Alfre Woodard were highlighted. In this section, there was a piece which really set the mood and added a greater meaning to the achievements which these people have earned. There was a poster somebody had made for the March on Washington in 1963 which read, "Look, Mom, dogs have TV shows, Negroes don't." The power of representation cannot be overstated. Representation inspires people. It does this by showing people, oftentimes the youth, that there are other people who look like them and are doing great things which they love. Knowing that this march was just 56 years ago, I am reminded that these days are still not past us. Today, there is still an underrepresentation of people of color in film and TV. Moving forward, I will continue to be proud of who I am, where my ancestors came from, and what they fought for. If it weren't for their persistence, it is likely that I wouldn't be here today, attending a college that provides as many opportunities as Montgomery College. My life would be full of the same struggles that they were faced with. The things that I learned on this trip were strong reminders to not allow the sacrifice that they made for me to go to waste, to not let the blood that was shed and lives that were lost to be in vain.
I've seen that video a lot and I just love it every time. I find it so powerful. So just quickly, I want to show you, this is a page from the Learning Lab. And these arrows here show you just how easy it is if you want to try, excuse me, digital storytelling or you want to download an object. So the first arrow here on the right points to the download button. So for example, if you were to look up Green Book in the Learning Lab, you would find this, open up to the page, and you could simply download it and then put it into your video. And there's another button here, this arrow that points to the quotation mark, that gives you a citation. So if you're putting an image into a video, you can also add the citation right at the same time. So I hope that gives you a sampling of some of the ways we're using digital objects from the museum for learning. We did just publish a book. Here it is. It just came out a few days ago. So we're really excited about that. And Kelly Elaine Navies, our next speaker, has a chapter in that book. So thanks very much. And we'll turn it over to Kelly Elaine.
Okay, that was wonderful. I loved that video, Philippa. So greetings, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, you see the Zoom, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You see the PowerPoint. Okay. So you all see the PowerPoint, right?
Yes.
Oh,
I
Kelly,
think you've
you're
muted yourself, Kelly Elaine.
Okay, it wasn't letting me unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Sorry about that. All right. Really wish I were there in person, but I'm honored to be here virtually. As museum specialist in oral history at the National Museum of African American History and Culture, I coordinate the Oral History Initiative. And now, why does this, now it's not moving forward. Hold on. We went through this. Now I need to share again. Okay. Okay, you're seeing the screen, correct?
Yes.
All right, it wasn't moving forward. It is the mission of the Oral History Initiative to document, preserve, and interpret stories through the art and practice of oral history, to support the research and exhibition goals of our curators, and to capture the oral histories of not only iconic elders of African Americana, but also others who have contributed to our shared history. We harness the power of oral history methodology to support the mission of the National Museum of African American History and Culture, which is to tell the unvarnished truth of American history through an African American lens. Each of our interview sessions are filmed by a professional videographer with state-of-the-art digital equipment. Then we work closely with catalogers and digital archivists, we call this our DigiTeam, to process the recordings and make them available to the public. Each interview must be transcribed, captioned, and have audio descriptions before it can be uploaded to the website. The stories humans tell shape our identity individually and collectively. They remind us of where we've been and help us to chart a way forward. Here at the National Museum of African American History and Culture, storytelling is evident in everything that we do, from exhibitions to programming and public outreach. In this presentation, I want to highlight a few of our oral history projects. One of the questions I get is, how do we develop our oral history projects? Well, the answer is in different ways. So the first project you see listed here, the Civil Rights History Project, that came to us before the museum even opened. And that was before I actually joined the museum. I've been here for 10 years, but the Civil Rights History Project was the result of a congressional mandate in 2009 as a collaboration between the team that existed then for the National Museum of African American History and Culture and the Library of Congress. And this is a collection of more than 140 interviews. And some of you may already be familiar with this particular project because it has been available for a while through the Library of Congress's website. And that particular oral history project was designed to capture people at that time who were toward the ends of their lives. And many of those individuals have passed on. So it's wonderful that they were able to capture that history at that time. I don't know how much you know about the museum, but when Lonnie Bunch was hired in 2003, there were some who thought, how could you have an African American museum? There are no artifacts. And at the time, we had 0 collections. But Lonnie Bunch and his team, they developed a project called African American Treasures, and they went all around the country and found that, in fact, there were thousands and thousands of artifacts that African Americans and others had been passing down in their families for generations. You see here a photo of Edward Taylor. The inset is the photo that he donated to us, and it is a picture of him at 19 as a soldier in the Korean War. And the Collection Donor Oral History Project was a project designed to capture the backstories of the individuals who donated these artifacts, the provenance. How did they come to have these artifacts in their families? And this particular one, of course, this was his own. photograph. Some of the more well-known donors who are featured are General Colin Powell, General Charles Bolden, who was a former NASA administrator. And in fact, just recently, I've decided to donate vintage photographs from my family collection, including a photo of my great-great-grandfather in a Civil War uniform. So Edward Taylor was a veteran of the Korean War, and the Korean War was the first war that was fully integrated. Of course, as you know, African Americans have fought in every military conflict since the American Revolutionary War, but the Korean War was the first one where the services were fully integrated. His interview is a perfect example of how one in-depth oral history can speak to different themes that are explored throughout the African American Museum. For example, his interview details his experiences with segregation and desegregation in the public school system, the desegregation of the military forces, and it also illustrates the constant specter of racial violence during the era of Jim Crow. One thing that stuck out for me from this particular interview was the fact that, and you're going to hear a clip of it, but not this particular clip. He grew up on the Eastern Shore, which is right on the water, but he wasn't allowed to go to the beach because of segregation laws. He said the first time he actually went to the beach was when he joined the military, and they sent them to Hawaii for boot camp. So imagine that. And he did not enjoy the beach in his hometown until the mid-1960s. I'm going to share a clip, and here he talks about an incident that occurred when he returned from the war.
The first thing I met, I was on a Greyhound bus because I didn't have a car. I didn't own a car. So I would get from Fort Meade. I would catch the bus to Baltimore, get on the bus, get on the Trailway. They called it, yeah, it was Trailway. Red Star. Red Star became Trailway. I got to get on the Trailway bus, and I sat down, and like I put my duffel bag in front of me because it was too big to put in my lap. And I chose the front line, first seat, and because there was plenty of room for my duffel bag. And I just assumed, this was in 1953, I just assumed that everything was all right. I hadn't been on a segregated bus or segregated restaurant in 2 years. So I sat down, and the bus driver, if he could have been a little more polite, I wouldn't have gotten so mad. He said, "You can't sit there, boy." I hadn't heard boy in a long time. So I got aggravated, and I said, "I'm going home. I'm going home." I kept saying, "I'm going home. I'm not going to get mad. I'm not going to get mad." And it was more than I could control. So I knew if I didn't do something, I was gonna hurt him. I knew that. So I got up. I took my duffel bag, and by now we were at the Bay Bridge, and the ferry boat was gonna take us across. There was no bridge, but over in the distance, you could see this beautiful bridge that was 99% complete. And I wanted to see it, so I said, I'm gonna go up here and look at the new bridge and cool off. But I took my duffel bag with me because I had a gun in it, and I didn't want nobody messing with it. I had a 45, a silver-plated 45 that I brought from Korea. I went up and leaned on the rail, and I was so mad I could feel water coming out my eyes. I was mad. And here's what happened. And this is why I tell people today what I'm going to tell you in a few minutes. I started throwing my things, the buttons, everything that looked army. I felt like pulling my shirt and throwing it. And I was throwing it in the Chesapeake Bay. And I got so upset that I started crying. And this man had his uniform on, a white man, and he walked down there, and he put his arm on my shoulder and said, "I don't blame you, Sergeant. I don't blame you." He said, I saw the whole thing, and I just don't blame you. You should throw it away, but you're only hurting yourself. And I had so much military in me. I looked at him and I said, "You're right, sir. You're right, sir." And I went back down, and I had cooled off a lot, but I'd thrown away just about everything that was military. But I wasn't no fool. I kept my record that said discharged with 2 Bronze Stars. I got that.
But you don't have the Bronze Stars.
I don't have them. I don't have them. The stars, the 2 Bronze Stars were mounted on a blue back, and I just pulled them off. I didn't want. I was so upset that I was ready to throw away everything. And I don't know how much it would take for me to jump right in behind it, but I did control that much. It was horrible.
So, Mr. Taylor witnessed a lot in his lifetime, including a murder when he was 8 years old, a racially motivated murder. But his story is a story of triumph. After all of this lifetime of traumatic experiences, he becomes a pioneer in the desegregation of the schools in his hometown. And one of the stories he tells in the oral history is how when the Black and white students were going to school together for the first time, there were a lot of fights. And there was supposed to be this huge race brawl planned. And what he did when he heard about it was he took the boys into the woods, the Black boys and the white boys, and he had them bring weapons and everything. And he took them out there in the middle of the woods, and then he told them the story of the Korean War. And he would basically scare them away from violence by sharing with them what real violence was like. And there's a bridge named after Mr. Taylor in his hometown now. So that particular project, of course, came at the beginning of the museum, the Collection Donor Oral History Project, and we continue that because we have thousands of people to interview. That was Lonnie Bunch. That was one of the first projects he wanted me to get started on. This project, the City of Hope, Resurrection City and the 1968 Poor People's Campaign, came about in one of my favorite ways, and that is through the instigation of a curator, Aaron Bryant, who had done research on the 1968 Poor People's Campaign and was developing this exhibition. But he came to me at the very beginning of the project and said, "I want you to be a part of this, and I want you to conduct interviews with individuals who were a part of that, who were leaders." So we interviewed leaders of the movement, grassroots activists. This was a multiracial movement that was developed by Marian Wright Edelman. A lot of people don't know who instigated it, and Dr. King in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And so we interviewed people of different races. We interviewed artists and photographers as well. I'm not going to share a clip from that today, but I wanted to talk about this project because of the way that it evolved. And this was a part of a temporary exhibition that we had up throughout the year 2018 to commemorate the 50th anniversary of this campaign. And what we did was we shared clips of the oral histories in a kiosk, and people could choose from several different interviews. They could choose clips from those interviews. Andrew Young is one of the more famous people in that collection, as well as Marian Wright Edelman, but there are others that you would not have heard of, grassroots activists. This project here, Reckoning, Protest, Defiance, Resilience, came about after an exhibition was developed. In this case, this particular exhibition has been up for several years now. It was supposed to be temporary, but it's been so popular that they've kept it up. And the head curator for this exhibition, Talisa Fleming, she came to me after the fact and said, I would like us to start people that are in this particular exhibition. What you're seeing now, the painting of Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor, if you don't know, was a young woman killed while sleeping in her apartment by the Louisville police. And this painting was done by Amy Sherald, who you probably know who she is. She's worldwide famous now, but she painted the portrait of Michelle Obama, for example. And this particular painting, we co-purchased it with the Speed Museum in Louisville. So if you come to the museum right now, it's not hanging up because we shared with them, and so they have it for now, but hopefully we'll get that back soon. I interviewed Ms. Sherald during the middle of the pandemic, so it had to be a virtual interview, which of course is not preferred, but at that time we had to do it in that way. I'm going to share a clip from an interview with Bisa Butler, which is digital storytelling. So our videographer at the time, Trudy Hutcherson, she took clips of the oral history interview and created this piece where Bisa Butler is talking about the quilt that she made for Harriet Tubman. And we commissioned her this particular art piece because it's based upon a photograph, which she talks about. The photograph was only recently discovered in the past few years. And it was the youngest known, it's the youngest photo. When I say young, meaning in this particular photo, Harriet Tubman is depicted younger than we've ever seen her. And we co-purchased this photograph along with the Library of Congress. And she created a quilt based upon this photograph. So I'll play this clip here.
As an artist, I need to be able to choose the subject because I'm having a connection with this subject. Something about them I feel like is calling to me. And then when I saw that photo of Harriet, there was nothing more to be said. I had never seen that photo before. It's a window. It's an opening. Well, first of all, her hair. Black people, our hair is very important. And Harriet's hair was so neat. I got to be able to see her hair texture. I felt that connection. How much her appearance meant to her told me what kind of fastidious person Harriet was. Her pose was almost like military style, very erect. And her tininess, also, I knew Harriet was small. How can this small person have freed so many people? How brave was she? Who is the person who leaves at night and goes back? And I thought about how quiet she had to be and how she had to sleep out there in the dark. The bravery just of that, not knowing, and then her deep belief in God. It helped me decide what colors I wanted to use. So in that piece, on one side, her face is a lot of blues and purples and dark shades. I was thinking about how quiet she had to be, how still. And then on the other side of her face, I used a lot of deep reds again, the power, the force of her personality to take all these people with her. On her arms, I used another fabric to show a lot of birds because she was a free woman and she got her own freedom. And then in her chest, where the boning of the outfit is, it's a fabric with flowers on a black sky. You can see tiny little stars. And I was thinking about, in one sense, her being in the night, but in another sense, her belief in God and in the infinite. And then the fabric around her, I used dark sunflowers. I read that the sunflower is known as a devotional flower because it looks like it's worshiping the sun. As the sun moves across the sky, the sunflower tilts to follow the sun. So that was like a nod to the North Star and her journey and how she found her way.
Fortunately, this is also not currently on view because they had to remove it for to make sure that it for conservation purposes. Eventually, it will be hanging again. I'm not sure when. Maybe it'll be when you come to visit. Bisa Butler is a graduate of Howard University, so there's a clip of this interview included in our new exhibition that just opened that's all about historically Black colleges and universities, and that's called At the Vanguard. And another of the artists that we interviewed, Rashawn Rucker, is also in a clip of our oral history is also included in that exhibition as well. So there are different ways that these oral histories can be used throughout the museum. Our most recent, or one of our most recent, because I have a couple that I just started, projects is the Social Justice Conversations Oral History Project. And this project is different from all the others because usually I conduct the oral history interviews. And in this particular case, our team went out and trained interns. We recruited scholars who also self-define themselves as activists and had, with a strong interest in social justice. They're between the ages of 18 and 30. We had 4 cohorts of interns who eventually traveled to Jacksonville, Florida, the California Bay Area, and Atlanta, Georgia, and eventually to conduct in Washington, D.C. In this photograph, you see one of our cohorts along with A. Peter Bailey. A. Peter Bailey is a journalist, lifelong activist. He was a close associate of Malcolm X. Some of you may be familiar with him. He's been in many documentaries about Malcolm X, and he's written several books. This photo was taken in Sankofa Bookstore. One of the things we did as a part of our multi-day training was to take the interns out on a tour of Washington, D.C., of sites related to Black history and civil rights. And that tour included Howard University, of course, which is where a lot of the movement took place. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee met on Howard University's campus. This cafe, Sankofa, was not there at that time. Now it hosts a place. It's owned by Haile Gerima, the Ethiopian filmmaker who created the film Sankofa that some of you may have heard of. And it is a local meeting place and also a bookstore as well. And on that tour, we go to the Civil War Memorial as well. We have an African-American Civil War Memorial on U Street and 9th Street in Washington, D.C. that is right across the street from the African-American Civil War Museum. So there are different sites that we took the interns on to prepare them for the project. Also, a part of their training is to do different exercises to get them to self-reflect on their own identity and what race means to them, because if they're going to be going out to conduct these interviews with people talking about their lives of activism and their experiences, they have to be comfortable talking about that, about themselves. And with oral history, it's important to know yourself before you go out and ask other people about their lives and their motivations. We recorded a total of 32 hours of conversational interviews. And when I say conversational interviews, what I mean is the first part of the interview was more traditional, like the first hour. And then the second half of the interview was a conversation. And that was interesting. So we, in that particular part, we wanted the narrator or the elder activist to also ask questions of the intern. And at first that was difficult, but as we continued the project, we were more able to get to trigger those type of conversations. I could answer more questions about that later if you have them, but it was an interesting learning process for all involved. I'm going to share a clip now from that project, and this is between Maya Clayton, who's a student at Howard University, and Dr. Joyce Ladner. And Dr. Joyce Ladner was one of the original members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee out of Mississippi, along with her sister, Dory Ladner. We have an interview with Joyce and Dory together as a part of the Civil Rights History Project, but not separately. And we wanted to do Dory as well as Joyce for this project, but unfortunately, she was ill at the time and now has passed away, so she couldn't participate in the project. In this particular clip, Maya, who, as I mentioned, is a student at Howard, and Dr. Ladner, they really form a bond that you can see in this discussion. Dr. Ladner was at one time was the interim president of Howard University. So she has close ties to Howard. She taught there for a while, and she was actually disappointed that she didn't become the actual permanent president. That's another story. She would have been the first woman president. She was the first interim interim president there. In this discussion, they're talking about the murders of Emmett Till and Trayvon Martin. And I'm assuming that you've heard of them, but if you haven't, afterwards you can ask questions. And Trayvon Martin is a recent incident, more recent, and Emmett Till was the incident that took place in 1955.
A lot of people my age feel that Trayvon Martin was this younger generation's Emmett Till.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
I 100% agree.
Why?
Well, when that happened, it was 2012, so I was around like 8 years old. So he was a lot older than I was,
Right.
but I don't know. I just remember seeing his face and how it looked exactly like mine, and it's almost like it's weird. Like it was frightening at first because it's like you feel like you die with that person, you
Yes,
know?
yes.
But I guess seeing a child die,
Yeah.
a child witnessing another child die is just traumatizing.
And you could see the parallels between what Emmett Till did for my generation.
In a way, yes. Why did you choose to be a part of this project?
A partner to talk to you. I mean, I was drawn to the fact that it would be interactive with a young person, a young activist, and felt I could learn something from you.
Yeah.
And I have.
Oh, Kelly, you're muted.
Oh, all right, I had a coughing fit there. I have a little cold, excuse me. But what I was saying was this project is so special to me. It's probably my favorite experience at the museum because I was able to bring to bear my experience as a teacher. I love working with young people. And so this was really fulfilling on a number of levels. These conversational interviews not only capture the stories of veteran activists, they have enabled an intergenerational dialogue that empowered the youth and reignited a sense of purpose in the elders. We had a public program where we brought together most of the participants, those that were able to come, all on one stage. And it was really quite a powerful and moving experience. The stories we collect here at the National Museum of African American History and Culture are for scholars, teachers, and at all levels. They're for the public. They enable us to witness firsthand testimony and to reflect upon the layered meanings of what it means to be an American, and thus move into the future from a place of greater awareness and shared understanding and collective power of our history. Thank you.
Thank you so much for both of these lovely presentations. Let me just get you, let me just spotlight the four of us real quick. Spotlight. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Wow. I mean, I'm just so grateful for everything that all of you have shared with us, starting with Anne giving us a real understanding of the vastness of the Smithsonian Institution. And I didn't realize how global it is actually. So that was really great. And to hear you name, some of my favorite museums like Cooper Hewitt, is, it's just really great. And to understand the numbers behind the collections, and the care with which you all approach your strategies around archiving. And Philippa, the examples that you've shared with us on digital storytelling and also strategies of just engaging with arts, because it's true, most people feel very intimidated or underprepared or unfamiliar with, and so they avoid museums or engaging with art or objects, artifacts in this way. And so you gave us something, very practical, two very practical directions. And then of course, Kelly, you're giving us all these examples. So of the different type, I mean, we hear the idea of oral histories, but then you've just shared with us how many different ways that they can be approached, that there's several different strategies for approaching that thematically. So you've given us collectively tools, strategies, and living examples of how digital humanities can operate at scale while remaining grounded in care, pedagogy, and public responsibility. So across this series, we've also explored embodiment, affect, and cultural memory. And today, you all have expanded that conversation into the sonic, the visual, and the audiovisual, the bringing of those two together, reminding us that knowledge is not only living with alphabetic text and storytelling, importantly, particularly in the digital humanities, offers us these possibilities around thinking beyond alphabetic text in terms of the ways that we tell stories. So I just want to thank you for that offering, and ask you a few questions. And so I want to encourage, as I start with, I will ask 2 questions, and then we'll open up to the audience, those of you in person and online. So just be ready with your questions in a moment. So I wanted to ask you about, so the Smithsonian, one of the things so impressive about it is the expansiveness, the scale at which you have, as you mentioned, and over 157 million objects and specimens. Was very interesting to learn that the majority of those are science. And with this ongoing commitment to digitization, which you mentioned that at this point, there's about 25% digitization. I'm not sure if that was Smithsonian Institute wide or if that was at in a particular institution. But so as we think about starting, institutions, for example, even universities, libraries, we've engaged with 3 librarians in this speaker series, including from the New York Public Library. So we've been thinking about, approaches to digitization, and I'm really curious to ask you about where to begin. Especially when you have the care ethic, you do have a commitment to historical responsibility, and what we've seen today, the commitment that Smithsonian has to community engagement. So how do you recommend that other institutions, or as we saw today with what Kelly was sharing with us, that even families, because as she mentioned, the African American Museum was started without an archive, and so there was a call for objects, and so that meant that those objects were coming from homes, just people, like smaller, maybe small cultural institutions, but for the most part, I think it sounded like a lot of individuals were giving their objects. So where should we begin?
Big question. I mean, I think it depends on the type of collection you're looking to digitize. I think if it's a university, it's thinking about, what are the materials that you want to have reach a wider audience. So kind of thinking about the things that you want to preserve and sort of put out that are already being used in person a lot. I think some of it is really practical, just where you're getting the funding to be able to do it. And sometimes sort of like the funding will come with the types of things that you're wanting to digitize. But I think it's starting somewhere, and I think developing your plan and strategy for how over time you will continue to add to, because it's going to be ongoing for forever, and so I think it's thinking about where you want to start, sort of what are your most important kind of assets that you're wanting to digitize, and then your strategy for how you sort of roll it out from there. But happy for others to jump in. Kelly, Elaine, talking about your experience.
Well, I would just say, I'm biased, and what I really want everyone to do more of, all institutions, is to support oral history. And I think that, it was a really important decision that Lonnie made to hire an oral historian at this museum. A lot of museums, and we have a few at the Smithsonian who now have oral historians, but before that, most oral histories were done by contractors. A museum would hire a contractor to do the oral histories, or you had curators doing oral history, but there was no one who was managing them. No one was cataloging them. No one was archiving them. So you have, even still at the Smithsonian, there are tons of oral history collections that are not cataloged because curators have them in their offices or on their computer somewhere or on floppy disks. I, for example, before I was a permanent or full-time oral historian here, I've done many things. I've taught school. I was a public librarian, but also I worked as a contractor for another institution I won't name now, who just hired me to do dozens and dozens of oral histories. And then they never hired anyone at that museum to do anything with those oral histories. And so they're just there. No one knows they're there. They're not available to the public. There's been no attempt to create a database to make them accessible because they never hired anyone to do that work. So what I would really stress is that institutions hire an oral historian, give that oral historian a team to work with, and let them go, because we need these stories. I think I hope I've shown how important they can be. I mean, there are many different perspectives on how oral histories can be used, or maybe are they accurate? I get that question a lot about oral history, and I think in the African American context, you can argue that what's written is is not always true. So you need all of these different sources. You need the oral and you need the written, especially in American history. I mean, I've seen things just in my own lifetime, written documents that are inaccurate, where you need an oral source. So we need all of these sources is what I want to stress. And I do think that too often institutions don't give oral history the support that it needs. So that's what I'm going to say.
Yeah, I think Kelly, Elaine, that's such a good point, thinking about sort of who is going to be the staffing for it. I also think, sort of your point about like, it's one thing to have all this digital stuff, but then like, what's your strategy for what you're going to do with it?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think all of those are so important to kind of think about. You don't want to just digitize for like digital sake. It's sort of, you ideally want to activate it and sort of have a purpose behind why you've chosen to digitize it.
Absolutely. Have someone there who can manage it.
And then the other point you made that I think is so good that we're thinking about in the Office of Educational Technology is, if you have a university where different departments are having their own approaches to digitizing, sort of how do you make sure things are centralized, or that, I mean, across the Smithsonian, everyone kind of has things saved in different ways. So we're really thinking about, how do we centralize just our digital education resources? Like Dr. Chisholm, that was one of her big projects, was like, what do we even have, across the Smithsonian? And so it's not just your strategy around what you're digitizing, but it's sort of where those sort of digital files live. Do you have a digital asset management system? Sort of what are you thinking about in terms of the metadata to make sure like everything is sort of has a consistent vocabulary, so it's searchable and findable. Those are all things that we're thinking about here at Smithsonian.
Well, that's one of my dreams for the Smithsonian, to centralize all of the oral histories, and so that they're all accessible. But yeah, I'll stop there.
You're saying so many words. I love when, everything just comes together, and we've talked about metadata. We've had sessions where we talked about that, asset management as well. So it's just really great to hear these come up again and again, because it really owns in the ideas that these things matter, and that they're, real front-facing concerns. And you also made me think about this summer I did a fellowship, an archival fellowship at the Children's Museum of Play in Rochester, New York. And I was talking with some of the archivists, and they were about like, how do you know when, what you're going to collect? Because when one curator shared a funny story about a guy sending a box of his old blinkies. And so that brings me to this next question is, and also I will mention this too, and the first session of our speaker series, a student had, and I was encouraging everyone that there's no stories that we can't find value in. And a student stood up and asked, well, I don't know, who's really interested in these stories, around them. And I responded, well, I'm raising my hand. I am, especially thinking of African diasporically, on the fragmentation that we've had around the world. And so I find the digital humanities and the open accessibility of it really is an opportunity for us to connect and learn about each other and across borders. And so that brings me to this question about which objects and whose stories matter or are worth even being captured in these photos that we might use in the digital story, or that we might use in the oral histories, or these objects that we might collect in the museum or the libraries, and how do we choose like the method of dissemination? I was thinking when you were talking, Kelly, about because I'm a podcaster, and I love oral histories as well. So my podcast is housed in the Columbia University Libraries, where I'm interviewing women artists of the global South diasporas. And so I'm wondering if you could speak to, Kelly, in this question when you respond, the role of podcasting in oral histories. And it's a little selfish, the reason why I'm asking this, because I've brought equipment here to give to the University of Lomé today, to start a podcast studio here at the University of Lomé. So,
well, it's funny that you should bring that up, because people are always saying you should do a podcast. You should do a podcast. I think podcasts are wonderful. I haven't personally done one yet. That's not my skill set. And I have listened to some great podcasts, and I've been interviewed on other people's podcasts. So I would say yes to podcasts. Now, I need to get my own experience doing them and creating them, but I do think that they're a wonderful way to get the stories out. Oral history, of course, being audio. So I do think that they're a wonderful way to share them. And yes, maybe one day I'll do one. If they create a space for me to do that here at the museum, that would be wonderful. It is something that's been talked about, but yeah, good luck with that project. I hope you do it. But all of the stories are important. You were saying which stories? All of the stories are important. And I was thinking all of the objects, right? The first object at the African American Museum was a stool that was created in South America, Ecuador, I believe, Afro-Ecuadorian, with Anansi the spider on top of it. And that's like the very first artifact that was given to Lonnie Bunch before the museum even opened. So, to begin to tell this story, yeah, I guess the answer to that is all of the stories, all of the artifacts are important.
Well, and I think for me as an educator, something I've thought about when you think about sort of classroom teachers and sort of where they're going for their information, it's so easy. So my background background is in art museums. It's so easy to find information about sort of the famous, dead white male artists, and so what can our role be as museum educators to bring forward stories that maybe are harder to find when you do your quick Google search? And Philip, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about sort of how that kind of played into your thinking for the Cultivating Learning series around the 250, where it wasn't just about the stories of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, we're running a series this year to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the US. And Anne and I talked a lot about it, and we really wanted, we know people are going to think about the big stories, analyzing a portrait of George Washington, some of the things that everyone will be thinking about when they think of 250, but we also really want to include the stories that people aren't going to automatically think about, or they might think about and we don't have as much information. So yeah, I think it's really important. The big stories and the more told and the lesser told are all important. And there's so many perspectives on each of these. That's another point we're trying to bring in, that you could have one topic and so many different perspectives.
That reminds me of the Getting Word project out of Monticello. I mean, the story of Thomas Jefferson is important, especially if you tell the whole story, right? And Getting Word is an oral history project where they're interviewing the descendants of those people who were enslaved at Monticello. So that's an important part of that story. I don't have a problem with telling the story of Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and all those guys, but tell the whole story. It's fascinating and it includes all of us. So yeah.
Right. So all these stories are so interconnected. So going down that path is going to lead you to so many other stories.
Just a comment is we can pull together some links of some of the things we've been mentioning today and send them later.
Perfect. Yes, thank you so much. I've been working with some graduate students here as interns, and they have been making a website. And so to archive, because we've been talking about, digital humanities, and we were like, well, you know what, I think we need to have an archive of this project. And so we will put those links on there. Thank you so much, Philippa. Okay, so now I'd like to open it up to the audience, whether you're in person or online. If you have a question, Dr. Agbo, do you have a question in the audience?
Yes, there are questions here.
Okay.
So anti-confusion. Your questions. If you are sitting in front, you sit in front, you sit better. That's your questions.
Anyone? Yes.
All right. Much thanks for these exquisite presentations. I really appreciated them. And I'm much more impressed by at least the image that I've seen and that we try to describe. I still have the image, and I would like to know if we would like to do it here in Université de Lomé. How can we put ideas together? That is recordings of the past, since we've just said each story matters. So how can we put all these stories together in a single picture, for example, as the picture that has been causing me trouble personally? Thank you.
Do you mean the shifting states Iraq picture?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I mean, I don't want to necessarily plug our learning lab, but it is a platform that would allow something like that. So if you pull up the image in the lab, you could then collect stories and put them all into one collection and find them in one place. One of Well, Jacqueline just told me she's taught digital storytelling, right? So maybe you can do a workshop there and collect them all and share them. That would be awesome.
Absolutely. I would love that.
I didn't hear you, Jacqueline, but maybe
Oh, yes, I said absolutely. I would love that. I just can't wait to hear all the stories, to see all the stories, to feel all the stories, to learn from all the students we have been engaging with, and the faculty. So that's one of the things I've been really encouraging this whole time is that, now that we've had this, we've had 10 really impactful sessions, and it has been such a learning journey for us all. And now, even with what you have shared with us, it's time to also create, right? And so when we think about digital humanities, we're not just consuming, but what we're hearing again and again is that we have the opportunity to shape the future of this field by adding our voices, adding our stories, and also our methods. And that's something that we've also been thinking about from the first session is the African epistemologies and how those are, as the speaker, John Daniel said, our Africanness of methods, how that can play a role as well in shaping the future of this field. So that's something that we're thinking about a lot about is looking at African diasporic ways of being and seeing the world, epistemologies, and thinking about those methods and how they might apply to the ways that we use and create in digital humanities.
That would have to include oral history, of course.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a couple of dancer scholars from Nigeria who spoke.
Oh, that's great.
Yes, so it's been really great.
Yeah.
So Dr. Agbo, do we have another question in the room?
Yes, Dr. Kofi, we have another question.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Jeremy. Thank you so much for your presentation. I highly appreciated them because we have an image and we have to think about the image, and it's, improves our critical thinking. And also hearing about storytelling, I just remember an English language fellow that said that she's going to have a project about storytelling. I mean, teaching to students how to write their own stories. Now, when we are talking about storytelling, we have first the information, the real information that we are casting. And the second thing is the orality, oral tradition. And then when we see in the presentation of Kelly, people that have been interviewed are to a certain extent old people. With the idea that they are the one that bear or hold the true information. But at the same time, we know that it might happen that those old people pass away. But before they pass away, they have to they pass away, and in African tradition, there is an author that say that when an old man that carries wisdom dies, is kind of a library that is burnt. So for us to keep that library, the information has been passed to another generation. Right. And when it is passed to another generation, there is a temptation of deformation of the information. So if we have that deformation and if it happens that the information has been transformed and we digitize that information, is it not a kind of weakness in the information that have been given to the upcoming generation? How do we try to keep the original, the rich information, knowing that those that were bearing, that were holding the information passed away and it has been given to other generations that, if not care put to that, we can have a kind of deformation of their information. Thank you.
I think if I'm understanding, you're saying, how do we maintain like the authenticity of the original story? Is that really what the question is? So I think that's a very important question. And especially in this day and age when things are manipulated, information is manipulated. And that is why, I mean, I conduct these really long interviews. My interviews are usually 2 to 2.5 hours long, and I was just reading an article today about how American attention spans are so short. But I don't let that stop me, because the whole recording is there. We do create, you saw the media pieces, we pull clips, we use clips because that is what people are going to listen to. But we are saving the entire document. We transcribe it as carefully as possible, and that is always going to be available. So someone can always go to the original if they want to see the original context, because of course you can pull something out and have it mean anything you want it to mean, right? But if you go back to the original interview, and I do hope that scholars would take the time to listen to the whole interview, read the full transcripts. I mean, that's one way. Obviously, when we are using them in different ways, we are manipulating them. The clips that I shared with you, right? Those are for a particular purpose. But that's why I try to talk about the full interview as well when I'm doing that. Of course, you can't always ensure that someone else is going to do that. I think your question is one that we have to keep asking. But at the same time, these materials are available to the public. So you can't control it, unfortunately. We just hope that the original, that root, that is preserved from now until the end of time. And that's as close as we can get. I mean, everything is an interpretation, right? Once it happens, all history is an interpretation. Yeah. Thank you for the question. Great question.
There's so many questions, so many things to think about. And I do want to honor your time. I want to close out with asking about this particular question, because as we've learned in this series, there has been in the digital humanities, as it's been developing as a field, it's been really sort of dominated in terms of thematics and methods from the global north. North America and Europe, Eurocentric. And so as we move into this renaissance in the digital humanities, we're thinking more about multiculturalism, more expansively and inclusively. I just want to ask you, what role does multilingualism play? Because I want to give a shout out to the students participating in this program, because Togo is French speaking. And so we have been having this has been I'm bilingual. I do speak French. So when I did my talk last week, or the first week, I'm losing track. But when I did my talk, I did it bilingual. But for the most part, the presentations have been in English, and the students are French. French is the main language here in Togo. So I'm just wondering what you have to say, or what are your thoughts about the role of multilingualism as we move this forward in this field, and have what we're calling this renaissance.
One of you want to take that one?
I mean, I think obviously, sort of the more languages your materials are able to be accessible in, the more accessible your materials are. I do think this is where technology can help us, with sort of like Google Translate, and, because I think in the past, just speaking from a museum perspective, creating multilingual materials, it's a big lift, in terms of staffing. It requires sort of separate editing process. And so I think, it's a big commitment. It also, just practically, you can only have so much text on the wall. And so again, as you think about how you can harness sort of the power of technology, of people's phones, to be able to sort of take material and put it into their language of choice, again, it just makes your content more accessible.
Yeah, I don't really have that much to add, but we did have a wonderful exhibition that you probably heard of that recently left. I guess it was here until last summer, in Slavery's Wake. And it was international. It's an international collaboration. between our museum, a museum in University in Senegal, Brown University, University in South Africa, I think a university in Brazil. So I don't know, did you get a chance to see the exhibition?
I did not, but I know about it.
It was in multiple languages. So the
Yeah.
text was in English, it was in French, it was in Portuguese. And that was the first time we had done something like that. And I think there was one other language, Spanish. And so yeah, it was in all of those languages. And it was wonderful. And it's traveling. So I don't know, maybe it's coming to Togo, but it is traveling around the world now. And that is something that I would hope that we would do more of. And they did. You have oral histories. I didn't do those particular oral histories. They were done in throughout the world in different spaces. But that is something I would hope that we would do more of. Those type
and
of
that's such a
use
great
multiple
example.
languages because we want to reach as many people as possible.
Absolutely. I love that example because it highlights the importance of collaboration. And not only in terms of at the level of the or at the stage of the transcription, but at the stage of planning curatorially, that was a collaboration. And
exactly. And I was involved a little, and I was supposed to go to Senegal with the group, but then the pandemic hit.
Oh, well, it's time for you to come back. I'm going there in 2 weeks.
It is time. It is time.
Yes, yes. Well, today's conversation has just been so impactful. I just want to thank you all, Anne, Kelly, Philippa, for the time and care that you have spent in preparing and also being with us today. Thank you so much. We are really taking all of this in, and it will definitely have an impact because after these sessions, the students are in that room where you see them sitting, continuing conversations and thinking about what we've just heard. And so I'm just very excited about what the future will hold. And I'm very proud of the University of Lomé for spearheading this project, you know, in the continent. And hopefully we'll be seeing more of this type of activity and conversations that include the African continent and African diaspora. So I think it means a lot also for that reason that you participated with us and you shared with us. And so thank you so much, truly. And yes, and thanks to everyone who joined us online and all the students in the audience. I'm about to join you guys in the room because I have some gifts and stuff. But yes, so thank you so much, Anne, Philippa, Kelly, for your time today. And I'll be in touch with the site and a thank you note as well.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. It's
Thanks
great
for
to
having
be
us.
with you all.
Thank you.